I want you to think about the earliest memory you have of your father. Maybe it is something small, his hands, his laugh, the way he smelled when he came home from work, the feeling of being lifted up, of being, in that moment, the most important person in his world. Now I want you to imagine that memory being the last one you ever got. My name is Anna. I was 7 years old when my father walked out of our house for the last time. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't leave a note. He simply stopped coming home. And after a few weeks of my mother waiting by the window and my little brother asking questions nobody had answers to, we understood. He had chosen someone else, a different woman, a different family, a different life, in a different city that had no room in it for us. I grew up in the space that absence left behind, and anyone who has grown up without a father knows exactly what I mean. It is not just the missing person, it is the missing shape. The gap at the dinner table, the empty seat at school plays, the question you learn very early, never to ask out loud because the answer hurts too much. Why wasn't I enough for him to stay? If you have ever asked yourself that question, this story is for you. And before I go any further, if someone in your life needs to hear this story, share it with them right now, because what I'm about to tell you took me 20 years to live through, and I want every person who needs it to find it. I am 32 years old now. I have a career I am proud of, a small apartment with plants on every windowsill, a life I built entirely without him. And 3 months ago, on a Tuesday evening in February, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, and standing on the other side of my door was my father. I did not open the door immediately. I stood in my hallway for a long time, longer than I would like to admit, with my hand on the latch and my heart doing something I had no name for. Not quite anger, not quite grief, something older than both, something that had been waiting, quietly, in a room inside me that I had kept locked for 20 years. He knocked again, gently like someone who was not sure they had the right to knock at all. I opened the door. He was older. Of course he was older. 20 years had passed. His hair was gray. His face had lines I didn't recognize. He was smaller than I remembered. Or perhaps I had simply grown. He looked at me for a long moment without speaking, and then his eyes filled with tears. "Anna," he said. "Just my name," like he had been practicing it. I looked at him, this man who had been the largest absence of my entire life, and I said, "You have 5 minutes. Talk." He talked for much longer than 5 minutes. I let him, because some part of me, the 7-year-old part that had waited by the window, needed to hear whatever he had come to say. His other family had fallen apart. The woman he had left us for, they had separated years ago. The children from that relationship were grown and largely estranged from him. He had been living alone for several years. He was not well, nothing immediately life-threatening, but enough to make him think, enough to make him look back at the road he had taken and see clearly what it had cost. He said he was sorry, many times, in many different ways, and then he said something I had not expected. "I don't expect anything from you. I came because I needed you to know that leaving was the worst decision I ever made. Not for me, for you, for your brother, for your mother. I have carried that every day, and I needed to say it to your face before I ran out of chances." I stood in my doorway and looked at this old, diminished, genuinely remorseful man, and I felt, to my complete surprise, something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet. Something earlier than forgiveness. The beginning of a choice. If you are still with me, if this story is opening something in you, I want you to subscribe to this channel, because every week I am going to bring you a story that goes to exactly these places. The places we don't talk about enough. The places where real life actually happens. I told him to come back in 1 week, that I needed time to think. He nodded, said thank you, turned and walked back down the path to a car I didn't recognize. I closed the door, sat down on the floor of my hallway, and cried for the first time in years, for the little girl who had waited by the window, for the years that couldn't be returned, for the weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. And then I called my brother. My brother Marcus had not seen our father since he was 4 years old. He was understandably less willing than I was to open any door, literal or otherwise. He made his choice 20 years ago, Marcus said. Why should we give him anything now? I didn't have a simple answer, because he was right, and also because something more complicated than rightness was asking to be heard. I thought about it for the entire week, and what I kept coming back to was this. The anger I had carried for 20 years had not hurt my father. He had lived his life regardless of it. The only person that anger had quietly, consistently cost was me, the energy spent on it, the relationships it had shadowed. The way I had kept people at a careful distance because somewhere, very deep, I had learned that the people who were supposed to stay left. That was his legacy in my life, and I had been living it faithfully, without even realizing. When he came back the following week, I sat across from him at my kitchen table, the same kitchen table I had bought myself, in the apartment I had built for myself, in the life I had constructed entirely from my own hands. And I said, I am not going to pretend 20 years didn't happen. I am not going to tell you it's okay, because it wasn't. What you did changed who I am in ways I am still figuring out. He nodded, eyes down. But I am also not going to carry this anymore, I said. Not for your sake. For mine. I told him I was willing to have occasional, careful contact. Not a relationship. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But a door left slightly open. Because the little girl who had waited by the window deserved, finally, to stop waiting. He cried, properly, quietly, with the particular grief of someone who fully understands what they lost and knows they cannot recover it. I did not cry. I had done that the week before, alone, on my hallway floor, where it belonged to me completely. My brother has not yet chosen to make contact. I respect that. We each carry this differently, and both ways are valid. My father and I have spoken 4 times since that Tuesday evening. Short conversations, careful ones. Nothing is restored, nothing is pretended, but something, very slowly, very cautiously is being built. Something new, something that has nothing to do with what was lost and everything to do with who I have chosen to become. Here is what 20 years and a knocked door taught me. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to the person who hurt you. It is a gift you give to yourself. It does not mean what they did was acceptable. It means you have decided to stop letting it define the edges of your life. My father left when I was 7. He knocked on my door when I was 32. And what I did next was entirely, completely, beautifully my choice.